Council's website following the meeting. This meeting is being streamed live on the Council's YouTube channel, and the link is provided on the Council's website. Please note that any comments posted on the chat feed of the Council's YouTube channel during the recording of this meeting will not be monitored by the Council. All mobile devices should be switched off or set to silent so that the meeting is not interrupted by ringtones. Please switch yourself to mute unless you are being asked by the chair to speak. For each item, the officer will present their report, following which they will read out any written statements received from members of the public on the particular item. The meeting will then be adjourned to enable those who have given notice of them wishing to address the committee on a particular application to do so. Each person will be invited to join the meeting via Zoom and will have 3 minutes to give their views. Once all comments have been given, the meeting will be reconvened for the members of the committee to discuss the application and reach a decision. Thank you. Okay, item agenda 1, we've got no apologies for absence. So agenda to item 2, any declarations of interest? And I've got no councillor indicating. Therefore, we will move on to, Kemi, what about our minutes?
They were not ready. They will come to the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Just to clarify, thank you. And we'll therefore move on to item agenda 3, which is, thank you. I'll hand over to our officers. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Chair, can we just talk about those minutes, please?
No, we're moving on with the meeting. Thank you.
It's just, this is the second time
Councillor
it's
Rimmer,
happened.
Councillor
I just
Rimmer.
wanted to make a comment on that, please.
No, thank you. We're going to move on with your meeting. Thank you.
We should talk about it, Chair.
We really do need to talk about it.
We should talk
To
about
hold
it.
you to an
In the
account.
running of this committee, it's appalling.
Members,
Seem to give a damn.
members, you've been asked to mute yourself unless asked to speak by the chair. We are not going to be discussing this now.
Listen,
I am more than happy to
listen.
discuss this later. We are moving on with the minutes, with the meeting.
Will you listen?
Thank you, Councillor Turner.
Will you
We're
listen?
moving, Councillor Turner, we're not
No.
discussing this now.
No,
Can you
we
please
should
mute
discuss
yourself
it.
unless asked?
We
Right,
should discuss it.
We're not doing that now. Thank you.
We need
It's
to have a brief
appalling.
discussion on this.
Don't
Councillor
brush
Rimmer
under
and
the
Councillor
carpet
Rimmer
all the
and
time.
Councillor Turner.
Point of order.
You have to mute yourself.
Point
The
of
minutes
order.
you have
Point of
been
order.
There is not
No,
a point.
absolutely not.
I wish to move a motion that we discuss the matter of the minutes of the planning committee. And I have a seconder, I believe, in Councillor Turner.
Yeah, absolutely. You shouldn't need to do a point of order.
So
It's
you
not
wish,
a point of order basis.
having-
Chairman,
thank
we
you.
should be
Having
able to
been-
discuss the running of this committee.
that is
And
not the
you,
purpose of
every
this minutes now.
every time you want to brush it under the carpet, listen, there is no reason why those minutes shouldn't be available. None whatsoever.
Right, Councillor Turner, can you please now be quiet whilst I speak? Thank you very much. Without
Off you
interruptions.
go then.
Without interruptions.
Go on
The
then.
officer has explained that the minutes were not ready. They'll be available for the next meeting. We now need to move on.
Why aren't they available?
That is irrelevant to this meeting at
No,
this
it
moment.
isn't irrelevant. Listen,
Councillor
it isn't
Turner.
irrelevant. No, listen, it's not irrelevant. The smooth running and operation of the council should make those minutes available. As Councillor Rimmer said, it's the second time and you don't care. It's like it doesn't matter.
Councillor Turner,
It
we're now
shows the
moving on. We
efficiency
are now
Of
moving
this
on. with the
committee and
meeting.
you as chairman.
The biggest problem with this committee is constant interruptions. So thank you. I
No, they're
appreciate
not constant. They're
With
not
respect,
constant.
Chair,
When we
I've
have,
moved
Councillor
a
Turner
motion.
and Councillor
we
Rimmer,
should be able
you
to
have
raise
been
it.
asked to be quiet unless the chair asks you to speak.
Listen,
You were explained
Sorry,
that
the
this is
Constitution says I have a right to move a motion, which I have done so. And now
You
we
wish
have
to
to
move the motion.
discuss that. I have silently listened to you, and I'm just saying I have moved a motion. We should at least discuss it.
You hold on for a moment, Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you.
Right. Absolutely ludicrous. Right, so you wish to take a motion in order to be able to speak about the minutes.
Yes.
Okay,
correct.
I am happy to take that to a vote. I therefore will ask all members of the committee, officers, if you could just take away the application from the screen at the moment so I can see the other participants in the meeting. I'm happy to take that to a vote. So I could ask each of you to unmute yourself, please. Thank you. I vote no.
Okay,
Councillor
can I speak
McGeorge.
to the motion?
Against.
No. Thank you. Councillor Carol Morris.
Sorry, Councillor Brown, sorry. Can Councillor Rimmer just make it clear what point he's raising so that that can be...
He wishes to have a discussion about why the minutes were not ready for this beginning of this meeting. Councillor Rimmer, is that a fair summary of what you want the motion to be?
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Thank
Chair.
you. Right.
I'd
Moving
like to
forward.
speak on seconding it,
And
because it's not
I'd
all
like to
I'm
prom-
about. So I'd like to speak and second it. Yeah, Chairman, there's a lack of democracy under your leadership here. Yeah, there's a lack of democracy.
Councillor Turner, if you'd
We should
like
be allowed to
to
speak.
to the motion, if you'd like to
Right.
speak to the motion as the because not that you want to discuss the motion, the fact that you want to speak to the motion, that you wish to be able to discuss why the minutes aren't prepared for this meeting, go ahead.
I did ask to speak first as the proposer and then Councillor Turner. Essentially, I think it's important to have this discussion, and that's why I proposed this, just because of good orderliness and how this meeting is run. I won't go into the substance of what that discussion would be out of respect for the rules. But obviously, there was an expectation on our part that has been let down. And I think it's important that we have that discussion, even if it takes 2 or 3 minutes. So we're giving a steer to our officers of how we would like to see these meetings run going forward.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Councillor Turner.
I have to say, this is outrageous. This committee is probably the worst one that I've ever attended for the running an organisation, the governance. And does it matter? Yes, it does. Absolutely. You know, the way that we conduct ourselves in council, and you like to criticise us for interrupting, you don't give us a voice, but there's a serious point here. And that is that there is governance around what we do. And Chairman, I think it's disgraceful that you don't embrace that governance. You know, you are there to serve the committee as much as anything else. Yet, as Councillor Rimmer said, this is the second time that the minutes haven't been there. In the past, we've had agendas turning up late or not at all, you know, and the whole efficiency of this committee is being pulled down. And it's like, nobody cares. Oh, minutes not here, we do it next time. Okay, well, why don't we just wrap it up at the end of the year? We can't go on like this, Chairman. And you, in your position, as I said before, you're quite happy to take the salary. You take the 15,000, work for it, and get to grips with running this committee. That is what we're asking. It's not hard, and it is within your control. That's what you should be doing. Simple as that. And I know why you don't want us to talk, because it just comes back to you, and it should do. You're your whole chairmanship is on the line here. And it's
Thank
amazing
you.
that you don't care.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Turner. And I think you need to go away and look at what special allowances I do and do not take, because I do not take a special allowance for this
Start
committee.
earning them.
So let's move forwards. Right,
Start
we'll now
earning them.
take this
enough.
to the vote. So we'll go back to the vote now, thank you. I vote no. Councillor McGeorge.
No.
Councillor Carol Morris.
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer.
In favour.
Councillor Turner.
In favour.
Councillor Kettle.
No.
Councillor Adairn.
Against.
Thank you.
Nobody cares about democracy,
we'll now move on
governance.
with the meeting. We'll
Show
now
you what
allow
Labour's all about and their allies.
Councillor Turner,
What's that?
you know what we're supposed to do during this meeting, that you are supposed to be on mute unless asked to speak by the chair. Can you
Get a
please
grip.
conduct yourself with a quorum? Thank
You
you.
get a grip, Chairman. That's
Thank
all
you,
I'm asking.
Councillor Turner.
Do
Right,
your job.
we'll now move on to item agenda 3. Thank you.
If we go to the next slide, please, Charles. Thank you, Chair. The site is located on the southern side of Christopher Martin Road, immediately at the junction with Honeywood Road, which forms the western boundary. Further to the north of the application site is the A127 Southend Arterial Road. The site sits within an established employment area surrounded by a number of large-scale industrial and warehouse buildings. This application is before Planning Committee as it constitutes a major application on site area. The application seeks permission for the erection of a 2.4 metre paladin fence, gates to the existing car park, and the enlargement of 2 number level access doors. If we can go to the next slide, please. The proposed paladin fencing would be erected along the western and northern boundaries of the site and along a northern section of the eastern boundary, where it connects with the existing gates at the site, which provide access to the service yard. The paladin fencing would be black in colour and would be similar in appearance to the existing paladin fencing at the site. The fencing would be constructed in the ground to a minimum depth of 1 metre. The local planning authority in recent years have sought alternative types of enclosure, seeking to raise the standard visually in the borough's employment areas. Paladin fencing is considered less harsh visually and still enables views into the site whilst maintaining security. In addition, gates are proposed to be erected which would serve the existing car park located to the northern part of the site. The proposed gates would be set back approximately 9 metres from the highway and would open inwards towards the site. The gates would be black in colour as well and would be 2.4 metres high, similar to the paladin fencing. We go to the next slide. The enlargement of the 2 number level access doors is proposed, which would result in the enlargement of 2 existing access doors, which are located on the eastern elevation of the building, and which serve the service yard. The proposed access doors would be constructed in similar positions to the existing doors, and the new doors would measure 7.5 metres wide by 7.5 metres high. The enlarged access doors would be dark grey in colour and would be similar in design and appearance to the existing doors. No comments have been received from third parties. Environmental Health have raised no objections. Essex County Council, as Highway Authority, have raised no objections and have recommended conditions to ensure the boundary fencing would be sited clear of the highway and the proposed gates would open inwards only. However, these conditions are not necessary as the drawings show that this would be the case. The Council's Arboriculture Officer has raised no objections, providing the trees already planted along the perimeter of the site, which were agreed as part of the previous application are not damaged during the construction. The application will provide new boundary fencing, gates to the car park, and the enlargement of 2 level access doors, which will have no adverse impact upon the character and appearance of the area and occupiers of adjacent sites. In conclusion, the application is recommended to members for approval, subject to the conditions identified at the end of the officer report on pages 9 and 10 of the agenda pack. Thank you.
Thank you. We don't have any members of the public wishing to speak on this item, nor do we have any statements to be read out. So I'll therefore hand it over to councillors to see if any councillor wishes to speak on this item. Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm a little bit worried that there was no mention of wildlife and the effect on wildlife in this report, or in the verbal update that we were given just now. On Thursday at the technical briefing, just for the benefit of members of the public, I asked a technical question related to wildlife, and my hope was that there would be answers forthcoming at this meeting because due notice was given as the current procedures allow for. I'm hoping that the answers are to hand, up the officer's sleeve or something. But before I can vote for this, I need to be reassured that there's no impact on wildlife.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Any other councillor wishing to speak? Councillor Carol Morris, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm rather bemused as to why this application is actually in front of the Planning Committee, because the council doesn't normally deal with enclosures. But and also, if you look at the top of page 5, which is 18/01165 full, the means of enclosure was actually agreed at the time that planning application was approved. So I'm a bit puzzled as to why we need to approve it again. In fact, why we have to approve the enclosure at all.
Can I respond to that, Councillor Brown?
Of course. I was just going to ask you to. Thanks, Chrissy.
Sorry. There's 2 issues here, Councillor Morris. The first issue is what the planning officer brought to attention. The application, because of its size, the actual area of land makes it a major application. And following the changes to the delegation, these applications purely by default have to come to committee for approval. And in terms of there is a variation to that, what was approved under the 2018 application. So we've already agreed as part of that application some form of enclosure. This is different to that, and it's slightly enlarged from that. So therefore, it requires a further consent from the applicant, and also it's got the additional changes to slight change to the elevation by including the alterations to the building itself. So it's one of those. It's very rare that they come to committee, but because we've got an employment area, we will get the odd one of these come to committee purely because of the size of the red line around the site. So one, it wasn't approved as part of the application, and secondly, it's in front of you because it's a major application, and that those are deemed to be considered by the planning committee.
Okay.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Carol? You happy with that? Thank you.
Yeah, I understand now why it appears to say that it's already been approved. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this particular planning application? Okay, councillors, I don't have anybody else wishing to speak. I'll therefore ask each of you to unmute yourself so we can go to the vote. Councillor Rimmer, sorry, you've just raised your hand. I didn't see that, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Sorry, Chair. I was still expecting an answer from one of the officers to my concerns because it will affect my vote.
I do that point as well. The site had a fencing around it as part of the original planning application, Councillor Rimmer, and therefore those issues of ecology would have been looked at that time. And also there are other areas within that are already fenced, and therefore the point you raised, the planning officer and the development manager raised it with me after that meeting, and we did look. We have looked into this. And you're on about things like hedgehogs and things moving through the site. That would have been part of that original application as for the actual development itself. So therefore, we've already addressed that point. And therefore there's no consideration that it needs to be looked at as part of this application. So the site was enclosed as part of the original permission, and therefore that had been addressed at that point.
Thank you. Councillor Rimmer, does that answer your question?
Just a small supplementary on it, which will probably clarify a bit more. Thank you, Chair. So in terms of extra height and extra depth, are we saying that extra height and extra depth are not having any extra effect on wildlife?
The general approach for that wildlife is the ground transition of hedgehogs, foxes, badgers moving across the ground, and that's where we look at that. So the height of the actual fence wouldn't impact that movement of you normally look at small animal movement rather than big animal movement over the top. So that's the position. So therefore the application looked purely at the material considerations of the change in the enclosure, and not at the actual principle of putting a fence up. If that's the right way around. Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's
Sorry,
all.
I had an image of leaping hedgehogs for a moment.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Okay, can I just clarify yet again, any other councillor wishing to speak or ask a question? Perfect. We'll now therefore move to the vote. If councillors could please unmute themselves. Okay, thank you. I will go to, and I vote in favour of the recommendation, which could be found at the bottom of page 3, that full planning permission be granted, subject to the conditions at the end of the report, and they can be found on page 9 and 10. So I vote in favour. Councillor McGeorge?
In favour.
Councillor Morris?
In favour.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Kettle?
In favour.
And Councillor Adeniran?
In favour.
Thank you. And with that, planning permission is granted subject to those conditions. We will now move on to planning to our item agenda 4, the land adjacent, and I'll move back to our officers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Can you hear me? Okay. Yes, the application relates to a garage court area off of Cadogan, or to the rear of Cadogan Terrace, off of Kenneth Road. The application had previously gone to the committee on the 8th of September last year, at which time the members asked for it to be deferred, further consideration on matters relating to a rear access pathway and a further car parking survey. Excuse me. Now we brought it back to yourselves to discuss those issues. I know there's a number of members who weren't at the last committee meeting on this application, and I'll just briefly go through the proposal itself. So we can go to the next slide. So this shows us the site. It's the same. Oh, go back one. That's it. Yeah. So it shows the site. It's to say it's a typical garage court area. You've got 2 blocks of garages. Total of 19 garages themselves, 7 that are current or were used at the last survey, and then there's a parking area to the western part of the site with access onto Kenneth Road. The proposal is to demolish all those garages and rejig the access onto Crown Avenue to the east of the site. Facing onto Kenneth Road would be a terrace of 3 properties. They would have their own dedicated car parking to the front onto Kenneth Road itself, whilst at the southern part of the site we'd have a pair of terrace of 2 semi-detached properties with those properties having side gardens with their own parking to the front of each dwelling, and the remainder of the site would be laid out to provide 14 spaces for residents use, existing residents use within the area. We go to the next slide just to show you what the area looks like currently. You can see just your typical kind of block kind of garage areas. Some of them are in use, some of them have just been boarded up, so they're not particularly attractive. They back onto a number of 1970s houses, rear gardens mainly, I think on free sizes back onto the site, and to the south of the site there is a kind of green area with a number of trees. If we go to the next slide, just a couple of slides showing the proposed dwellings themselves. These are similar to designs you've probably seen on other garage courts we've had recently. They're kind of buff style brickwork with grey roofs, with a kind of brick detailing to break up the fronts and side elevations. This is the 3 properties onto Kenneth Road. If we go to the next slide. This is the kind of semi-detached one. These ones is where this pair have got these side gardens, so they've got slightly different elevational treatments on the side, where you've got the patio door area on the ground floor leading to the side gardens, but they're very similar to those on the front. Go to the next slide. So the last committee we considered the principal, say it's an urban area surrounded by residential properties, and in principle some form of residential development could be accepted, subject to impacts on neighbours, parking and the like. In terms of the design, I say the typical 2-storey properties will be in keeping with what's surrounding the site, have been laid out to ensure that they don't impact any directly on neighbouring properties in terms of overlooking or overshadowing, back-to-back distances and isolation distances. All respect the current guidances that the council applies in these cases. In terms of garden areas, each property will have sufficient garden amenity space to meet our relevant guidance. And in terms of parking, each of the new properties will have, as mentioned earlier, 2 spaces for each of the units, and that would meet our relevant parking standards. So the main issue in this case that the residents and members had raised at the last committee was the issue of car parking and the impact that loss of this parking may have on surrounding areas. On the previous application, a survey had been done by the applicants. This was done at what they call a normal time. The surveys of that type, which is about 50% of the parking within the area available. But members, following a number of residents concerned, would raise the issue of the Wales United Football Club and parking at the times that the trainings occurring at those activities. And to that end, the applicants carried out a survey last November, and the relevant report was attached to the agenda. And this showed that when the training occurred on the 3rd of November between 6 and 7 o'clock, whilst there was an increase in parking within the area, it showed that there was 14 vehicles actually using the application site at that time, but there was an increase in parking within the surrounding roads, Kenneth Road, and particularly in Curran Avenue, as you expect. But it still showed that there was 47 spaces available on the night of the training was occurring, whilst on the second night of the survey, on the 5th of November, this actually being the first night of the second lockdown, cars parked within the area than normal. This showed that there was still 44 of spaces available for residents that may be displaced, or for vehicles that may be displaced from the application site. As a result, I don't feel that the proposal itself will add significantly to the parking issues in the area. The other issue that was raised by residents was the access way to the rear of number 7, 8 and 9 Cadogan Terrace. The applicants have informed me that, and it's shown on the plan there, that there'll be a secure access way to the rear of the properties. There will be a dedicated secure gates with limitations on its uses to those 3 properties, and they feel that will provide a secure environment for access to the rear of their properties. So overall, we feel that the proposal with this additional parking survey shows that the application will make good use of this underused urban site, will not lead to any parking issues within the area, has been designed to ensure it doesn't impact seriously or detrimentally on neighbouring properties, and is recommended to the committee, subject to various conditions set out at the end of the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We do have some members of the public wishing to speak on this matter, so I will be at this point adjourning the meeting so that we can take those members of the public. Our first member of the public, I believe, who wishes to speak is Mr. Co-Smith.
Is joining the meeting.
Thank you.
Should I bring in okay, it's joined. Mr. Co-Smith. I'm still connecting.
If he's not able to connect yet, is Mr. Quister there? And maybe you can bring him in first.
It's still connecting to audio. I think it's connected now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Co-Smith.
Good evening.
Good evening. You've joined the Zoom meeting. You can address the committee. You've got 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. I'm Mr. Co-Smith. I live at 7 Godalming Terrace. I'm the owner and occupier. First of all, I'd like to say there's one question that's been outstanding for me. I need to know how far away this new property is going to be built from my property, the side elevation. Other points I need to raise with you, as this, what's been happening about the security of that property at the back, once this property, the new proposed building has been sorted out. Why haven't we had any communication about the change plans? Also, from the previous meeting, a lot of neighbours in the area wanted to have their say and wasn't contacted, so they couldn't do this. 4, has the parking issues been addressed in any shape or form? Because building these properties will definitely create a bigger problem that's already here, which is a massive problem already. In the last 6 months, the Bales Football Club has been shut and parking has not been an issue. But as soon as that Bales Football Club opens up, the parking will then be horrendous again. Well, during the proposals, we was told that councils will not be building on greenfield sites. Yet last weekend, I received a brochure telling me that the councils were proposing on the Tyfields area of building 30 homes, which is a greenfield site. We had suggestions about moving this house further over so it would not be so intimidating onto our property.
Mr. Costa,
So,
are you finished?
Yes, and also the other issue about the access road where you're readjusting it, that will come out bang opposite the Bowers Club. Already that's a very dangerous situation where people coming and through and from there, and you'll be making an actual crossroads. Has anyone actually addressed that? There's people actually been to this area and looked at it after 3 o'clock in the afternoon when it all starts happening. It's not a pleasant place at times. There's been a lot of anger going on. People are getting really fed up with the parking situation and the traffic. I remember last time there was a suggestion we parked in Manor Avenue or Clarendon Road and walked home. No, I don't think that's ever going to happen. And now, obviously, you're using Clarendon Road as the place where the Tyfield site's going to be the entrance to. So obviously there more parking issues are going to arise further down the road if that plan goes ahead as well. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time, sir, for putting forward your views to the committee. And those points will be addressed by officers when we reconvene the meeting. Thank you. I believe we've next got another speaker. Yes. Are they able to access, Kemi? Thank you.
Yes, they're joining. And
thank you.
Mr. Christo?
Access, Kemi.
Mr. Christo, you're now in the Zoom. Could you please close your YouTube browser, please?
Yeah, I have.
Okay, thank you. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee.
Thank you, councillors. My name is Chris Christou. I reside at 9 Cadogan Terrace. I didn't really want to go over the same sort of things that I went over last time, but quite clearly, the parking is going to still remain an issue. I have been listening to this meeting. You have admitted that parking is actually going to be worse than the previous time that you took the survey, but I don't really think you understand or have taken into consideration rather the fact that we're still in lockdown. Some parking is pretty bad as it is now, but it's going to be a lot worse once lockdown is over and people can access Bowers for watching football matches, and on top of the training. So I wanted to reiterate that I'm obviously I'm not happy, like many of the members of our community. And going off a point that Mike made, Mr. Co-Smith made, I never received a letter about this meeting, when it was, and anything like that. In fact, I was shown his, and that's how I got into this meeting. If I haven't received anything, and I was in the last meeting, I don't see how many people around this area are not going to be, have been fully informed of when this is and when they can talk. One other thing, I mentioned this last time, and it doesn't look to have been discussed on the redone agenda that I looked up online, and that's emergency services in the area, and how they're going to access when we're overrun with parking. I said this last time, but there are quite a few older people on this road, and if an ambulance or fire truck or whatever it is that has to come in quickly, they may have serious and real errors. And going back, sorry, to the parking, you've also not taken into the fact that some of us have young children. My kid's going to be 17 in 2 years' time. He's going to want lessons. He's going to want a car. I have a neighbour that's is doing driving lessons. I have another neighbour that is about to start driving lessons, and we're not the only ones. And we all have more than one kid too, or some of us. So you're going to take away all these parking spaces, and you are taking away these parking spaces, and you're not thinking about the future of the people that have bought and paid for the houses that live in this area. So we're going to suffer for you to bring in this new housing. That's pretty much what I want to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you
for bringing forward your points. I'd now like to reconvene the meeting. And first of all, I'd just like to take it to our officers that can address some of the points raised by the public before I open it up to councillors. Thank you. First thing that I'd like the officers to be able to come back to us is we've had a few residents there ask about notification to residents. Could you please just talk us through that? Thank you. Bringing forward your points. I'd now like to reconvene the meeting. Oh, Kemi, our last speaker is still in the meeting. I can hear their YouTube reverberating back.
Yes, I have removed him from the meeting.
Right, thank you. Sorry, Ms. Lyons, do I come back to you for a comment on the consultation? Thank you.
Sorry, there was no changes to the application. We were purely looking at the traffic survey. So the application was as the officers showed initially, and that was at the consultation in January 2020 and July 2020. So because there was no alterations to the planning application itself, we looked at the matters that were raised at planning committee, which were those matters relating to car parking and that access way. There was no requirement to reconsult with residents.
Thank you. Also, we've had the point raised about when the planning survey was conducted and whether or not that was lockdown, not lockdown, football club there, not football club there, etc. Because we just reiterate those points, please, before I take it to the committee.
I mean, that is it. I mean, Mr. Gill can explain more, but that is the on page 15 of the planning report. It sets out a paragraph that sort of explains the parking stress surveys that were taken, and does admit there was an increase in parking. This is a garage court we're dealing with some parking, but also garages. Where the loss of parking isn't excessive in terms of what we're losing. We're losing more garages than actual car parking spaces. Therefore, this parking stress survey, shows there is a loss of parking, or it shows that there's parking stresses, but there's still spaces available. So, based on that, I think there is adequate parking area, and there's parking in the area to cover any loss that is found from removing these spaces from this rear garage court. So therefore, I mean, that's sort of what that says. Unless Dave, have you got anything else you want to add to that?
No, that's correct the way you're saying it. So we've say the parking within the site is very limited in terms of the overall numbers. There's only say 14 were on site at the time of the surveys. Anybody who actually has a garage at the moment could be relocated within garages in the locality, and the housing have confirmed that would be the case. And so we're just looking at saying 40 spaces would still be available, or was available in those times of the survey.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. Also, it was raised by our residents regarding access for our emergency vehicles. I don't know if you want to comment on that as well, Mr. Gill. Thank you.
I say the Highway Authority have looked at the access arrangements, the new access arrangements. So one of the residents mentioned about the directly opposite the Bowers United. It wouldn't be staggered away from that, so there would be less safety issues, and say that fire access would still be along Kenneth Road and the upper end of Crown Avenue, and unless there was double banked parking, which is elite, it shouldn't happen anyway. There should be plenty of access for emergency vehicles at all times.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. And the other point that our residents raised was about security at the back of the properties.
Yes, I mentioned that there is on the drawings, are probably difficult to see from the plans, but there is a proposed security access gate, which I understand the housing would provide keys for the residents for their own use and nobody else, so that would ensure that they are safe. And I think Secure by Design are involved as well on that issue.
Thank you, Mr. Gill. I believe that covers the points raised by our residents. I just want to come back to the compliance.
Councillor Brown, there was one other issue, and that related to the side to back distance of the properties on Cadogan Terrace. Can you just shed any more light on that for the committee, Dave?
Yeah, can do. Yeah, so again, the drawings do show that, but between the side or wall of the proposed dwelling on plot, is it 5? Yeah, and the rear of those in Cadogan Terrace, it's 18.5 meters, which is quite significantly above our normal minimum side to rear distances. And the actual wall facing those properties at first floor level only includes a secondary window, the obscure glaze, so there wouldn't be any issues in terms of overlooking. Hope that answers that one.
Thank you, officers. And I want to open it up to councillors for discussion, so we can reach a decision. Councillor Rimmer's had his hand up for some time, so I'm going to come to Councillor Rimmer first.
Thank you, Chair. I know this area quite well. obviously it's in my ward, and I've walked around it a number of times. I've knocked on doors, I've tested the temperature, and I get that we're not going to get a perfect parking survey at this time. These times are not normal. It's debatable whether the Bowers Gifford Football Club is at full use, even though on that eve of lockdown situation, or not. That's fair enough. I've also heard from the officers a lot of the overspill happens into other roads rather than Cadogan Terrace. And when we heard that at the technical briefing. But what I'm hearing from residents, and I'm not just talking about the residents who spoke tonight, by the way, or the ones who wrote in, but I hear constantly there's huge parking pinch points and pressures in that area. And I can only, and based on the evidence that I've got on that, I would find it very difficult, unfortunately, to support this application, I'm afraid to say. I think the officers have actually tried to address my concerns. So I'm going to give them, I have to give them credit for that. They've addressed the concerns of the residents as well, who raised the possibility of drug dealing going on in that particular alleyway if it wasn't secured off. That was what was raised at the last meeting. And that's clearly been addressed. And I like the mitigation on that. They went out and they did these extra parking surveys. In all consciousness, because I know the situation and because of the evidence, I walked around there as well, and I also know the overspill goes into other roads. I've got St Mary's Crescent, which is much further down, is actually, I get complaints from there about the parking situation and because of the curved nature of the road and how it gets clogged up when there are football matches going on. So I have to take all of that into account. And I can't ignore that local knowledge. And it's an apology to the officer because I think he's tried his best on this one. But on this, I'm afraid I'm going to have to solidly vote against.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Any other councillor wishing to speak? No, I mean, what I would say is that we've obviously listened to the residents this evening, and it's clear from that they're having a personal experience that parking is difficult. Our problem comes from the evidence that we have gathered, and that the parking survey shows that there was over 40 spaces. I agree lockdown can be a difficult time to sort of really calculate exactly the parking issues there. Partly that could be in regards to the fact that you could argue more people are at home, so it's more likely that they're parked. I know sort of since last March, there's been several cars parked on my drive permanently. So it is difficult, it is challenging. And we're further challenged by the fact that we have no address coming back from Essex Highways. They have no objections in terms of parking or in terms of access or anything else at all. And that ties our hands, sadly. I would like to come to Councillor Kettle, who has raised her hand before I continue. Councillor Kettle.
Just unmute. I know where I live, I have the same problem, so I can relate to Councillor Rimmer's parking problems. But although where I live has got nothing to do with the Cadogan Terrace, right? But with the overspill and lack of parking and the Cherry Down incident, they're parking in my road up on ruts, causing ruts, and down the access roads. And it's not just the residents there which are complaining, but we're getting commuters parked down there plus shoppers. Now, there is a fact that an emergency vehicle, and this is my concern when conducting parking, went down to my side access road to the bottom of the garages because a resident down there had a heart attack, and it took the ambulance 20 minutes to come from the garage area to the top of my road to get the lady to the hospital, and it's not that far. So when dealing with the parking, and I know we're in lockdown, so it's not going to be the same, but even with lockdown, we get this. So I can sympathise with Councillor Rimmer about parking in the access roads and other parts of the street and causing problems with the residents, with the emergency vehicles as well. So I just thought I'll put my 2 pence. But thank you for listening anyway.
Thank you,
That's all.
Councillor. Thank you. Any other councillors wishing to speak on this issue? Okay then, councillors, with that, I'd like you to unmute yourselves.
Councillor Morris has raised their hand to speak.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Sorry, Carol, would you like to come in now?
Yeah, I was just going to say, we often have this problem of people have parking difficulties. There aren't enough parking spaces on the streets. We do parking surveys like this one, which comes up and says there are parking spaces. We don't get the support from Essex County Council. Unfortunately, much as we sympathise with the residents, we can't turn the application down because of that, because we don't have the backup support from these people. Thank you.
Carol, you're perfectly right. Essex County Council letting us down again. It's nothing new. With that, I don't see anybody else's hands up. Nobody else is indicating, so I'd like to take this to the vote. Could you please unmute yourselves, councillors, so I can go through? Thank you. The recommendation, you can see on page 14, it's that to grant conditional planning permission. Those conditions are listed at the end of the report from page 16 to 20. There's quite a lot of conditions there for you. Thank you. So I vote in favour of the recommendation. Councillor McGeorge?
In favour.
Councillor Morris?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
Against.
Councillor Turner?
Definitely against.
Councillor Kettle?
I'm going to abstain on this one because I can't really make up my mind.
Thank you. Councillor Adair?
In favour.
Thank you. And with that, planning permission, conditional planning permission is granted. I'd now like to move on to item agenda 5. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. So I'm bringing you on to Briscoe County Junior and Infant School. It's in Felmores End in Pitsea, and this application has been brought to committee due to the size of the site. So next slide, please. So this application is situated on the southern end of Felmores End. It's west of Rectory Road and residential properties in Oakdean. It's north of Shalverden Avenue and it's east of properties in Felmore. So for this proposal, they're proposing to erect a new 2.4 green paladin fencing around the existing boundary. And this is to replace the existing fence for safeguarding issues. They are also proposing a 3-metre high gate to the southern elevation and 2 2.4 high gates, which will match existing gates to the northeast. Paladin fencing has been chosen due to because it is less harsh looking. It also has been chosen because the existing fence, because of safeguarding issues, it needs to be upgraded. In terms of this, there will be no proposed works to soft landscaping around the fencing. The tree officer has not objected, and in terms of the depth of the fencing, this will be around 0.8 metres and 0.8 metres, and this will have no impact on the ecology, and wildlife will still be able to go through the fence and be able to leave the site. In terms of, there was no highway objections, and there was one neighbour objection due to the access to the properties in Oakdean. However, the access to the highway will stay exactly the same, and the contractors will park on site during the proposal. Next slide, Charles. So this is just an example of some of the fencing that will be used. So at the moment, as you can see, some of the is it's just being upgraded, so it's just the fencing is already in place. Next slide. Yes, and just a couple of examples of how the fencing and whereabouts it will be allocated. Next slide. And this is just an example, and at the bottom you can see where the animals in the will be able to come through, so this will be no problem. Next slide, please. There you go. Thank you. Oh, and also I did have a statement on behalf of the applicant, and they said that safeguarding has been an ongoing issue and concern for Briscoe Primary School and Essex Police due to the majority of the perimeter fencing to the site being inadequate for safeguarding pupils, staff and the facility. The basic requirement of keeping pupils and staff safe is not being met. The inadequate fencing is in urgent need of replacement due to a number of break-ins and children climbing over and leaving the premises unattended. Funding has been secured through a condition improvement funding bid application as the Department of Education identified this site as an urgent safeguarding concern. The fencing arrangement will stay the same as the existing. The only change is the type of fencing and the overall height. The proposed fence will be a twin wire mesh fence identified in many schools to a height of 2.4 metres to comply with the Department of Education's requirements. The work will be undertaken in stages and is anticipated to take around 3 to 4 weeks to complete. The contractor will be parking on the school site during the works. Planning approval is fundamental to safeguarding the children of the school. Thank you. And as this has been recommended for grant.
Thank you, and thank you for reading out that statement. I don't believe we have anybody coming in from the public for this. Kemi, we only have a statement. I therefore am going to open this up to our councillors for their comments. And the first councillor I have is Councillor Rimmer.
I'll be very quick. I think this is the planning officer's first presentation. I thought she did very well, and she answered the questions that I brought up in the technical meeting in advance on wildlife and the depth of the fence, and that shows an actual great care in actually coming forward with those answers. So thank you for that. I'm satisfied there are no flying hedgehogs in the vicinity, so I'll be voting in favour of this application.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. And obviously that is the purpose of the technical briefings, and it's the purpose of having the technical briefings quite some time before the meeting, so that where councillors do have questions, that they're able to raise those with officers and get those responses. So I'm pleased that you're finding that useful, Councillor Rimmer. Any other councillor wishing to speak? No, therefore I'd just like to say something as a, it's been a very difficult time for our schools, for our students who attend schools and for our parents. And it's wonderful to see this kind of facility is going to be in our borough for those students. They're definitely in need of this kind of enrichment, this kind of empowerment, and this is going to be a fantastic facility for that community. And so I wholeheartedly support this this evening. I'd ask councillors now if they could please unmute themselves so we can go to the vote. And I vote, and the recommendation is for full planning permission to be granted, and you can see that the conditions of that is listed at the end of the report. Thank you. I vote in favour. Councillor McGeorge?
In favour.
Councillor Morris?
In favour.
Councillor Rimmer?
In favour.
Councillor Turner?
For.
Councillor Kettle?
In favour.
Councillor Guerin?
In favour.
And that is unanimously passed by this committee. Thank you. With that, we now can move on to item agenda 6. At Barn Cottage. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If we can go to the next slide, please. So application 20/01128/full. So the site is located on the northern side of Ty Common Road in the Little Bursted Conservation Area and comprises Barn Cottage, which is a detached two-storey dwelling. To the northwest is the Bursted Golf Club, and to the southeast is Stockwell Hall, which is a Grade 2 listed building. This application is before members as the previous application for a similar proposal was challenged by Stockwell Hall. The application was challenged on the grounds that Essex County Council, who act as the council's specialist advisor for historic buildings and conservation, had identified less than substantial harm arising from the previous proposal. This, in line with the MPPF, indicates that the application should be refused unless it can be demonstrated that substantial public benefits would outweigh the harm identified. The council could not demonstrate that the consideration of substantial public benefits exercise had been undertaken before granting planning permission, and so the planning permission was quashed following a judicial review. We go to the next slide. So following this, the applicant has submitted the current application, and the application seeks permission for the erection of a first floor side extension, which incorporates 3 rear-facing pitched roof dormer windows and 1 rear-facing roof light on the northwest roof elevation. The application initially proposed a number of roof alterations along the southeast roof elevation, which fronted Stockwell Hall. Essex County Council advised that whilst they had no objection in principle to an extension in this location, the proposed roof lights on the southeast elevation were an intrusive element with regards to the setting of Stockwell Hall. And following this initial response from Essex County Council, these roof alterations on that southeast elevation were removed, thereby retaining a blank roof elevation. Essex County Council advised that they had no objections to the amended proposal, concluding that harm will not have been caused by the proposals, and that the proposal will preserve the setting of the heritage asset, and the views from Stockwell Hall will not be impacted. The amended proposal would raise the eaves and ridge height of the existing attached garage by approximately 0.7 metres, and therefore the angle of the existing roof pitch would be retained and would remain unchanged. This is to facilitate floor space within the roof area to provide two new bedrooms and a bathroom. The first floor side extension would be constructed using brick and timber boarding and roof tiles to match the existing dwelling. The proposed extension is considered to be subservient to the existing dwelling and is considered a sympathetic design. Go to the next slide, please. So this is just showing some views of Barn Cottage. So representations were received from 2 neighbours objecting to the proposal on the grounds of obstruction caused by construction material delivery vehicles, encroachment and overlooking and harm to Stockwell Hall, and harm to the character of the conservation area. Having regard to the scale of the existing dwelling, the proposal is not considered to represent a disproportionate addition over and above the size of the original building, and will comply with the MPPF. Having special regard to the Planning, Listed Buildings and Conservation Areas Act 1990, the proposal is not considered to result in harm to Stockwell Hall, and is considered to preserve the setting of the heritage asset and the views from Stockwell Hall. And in conclusion, the application is recommended to members for approval, subject to the conditions identified at the end of the officer report on page 84 of the agenda pack. If we go to the next slide. So this just shows some of the views from Stockwell Hall. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At this point, I need to adjourn the meeting. I'll come to you first, Councillor Turner. I see you've already got your hand up, because we do have a couple of members of the public who wish to come in. Kemi, do we have Mr. Little there or Mr. Morris?
Mr. Morris is joining the meeting. I've added.
Thank you.
It's connecting to audio.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Morris.
Hello.
You can address the committee now.
Thank you very much. I'd just like to highlight that Stockwell Hall is a Grade 2 star listed building, so the significance is somewhat greater than a Grade 2 in the officer's report. As per the applicant's heritage assessment, Barn Cottage was built in the 1970s on land which was formerly owned and occupied by the estate. This historically would have been occupied by ancillary buildings built to serve and offer something to the main dwelling, being Stockwell Hall. It's evident that Barn Cottage's design at the moment is somewhat more sensitive to its setting than the proposal, with the northwest wing currently being only single story. This is the elevation that is most visible from the walled garden and Stockwell Hall's Grade 2 listed greenhouse. The proposal to raise the ridge by an excess of 60% is direct contradiction in efforts to preserve the protected the listed elements of the building and their setting. Further to this, it is also offers a sense of encroachment and overlooking, which is completely inconsistent with Stockwell Hall's history, i.e. being the principal dwelling surrounded by those which are subservient. The government's policies on development affecting heritage assets are set out in the section 16 of the MPPF, where paragraph 193 states that irrespective of the extent of the harm, great weight should be given to the asset's conservation, i.e. the more important the asset, the greater the weight. And I'd reiterate, we're talking about a Grade 2 star listed building here, which is top 5% significant in the country. The asset's conservation is clearly violated by the increase in massing of Barn Cottage. And it's inconceivable that Barn Cottage today would be permitted for permission for development. And particularly in the Greenbelt and Conservation Area, it's something that I would ask you to consider preserving and limiting the impact already caused by the development in the setting of the historic asset and not to add to it. It's already a large 4-bedroom house. Policy BAS BE 12 prohibits extensions of dwellings that cause material harm to the character of the surrounding area, i.e. overlooking, overshadowing, overdominance. The location of the subject property and its application is no greater than 3 meters from the boundary of Stockwell Hall, where the listed greenhouse is, and in a past life, this would have been used for growing and cultivating produce of the estate. And the walled garden in its very nature would have been designed for peaceful and secluded and undisturbed but by nature. So the application would again impede and harm this setting. Barn Cottage is visible from Tyre Common Road and throughout many aspects within Stockwell Hall and its grounds. The raise the ridge by 60%, as I've said before, offers obvious harm to the setting and offers no public benefit in which to weigh against the harm as required by the MPPF. And for these reasons, I think it should not be granted.
Perfect timing, Mr. Vincent. Thank you. Those points will be addressed when we reconvene the meeting. Thank you. I believe we've got Lucy Smith.
Yes, she's joining. She's connecting. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hello, Lucy.
Hello, sorry, have I connected?
Now, you're now in the meeting. You've got 3 minutes to address the committee. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Lucy Smith. I'm a planner at Ingleton Wood, speaking on behalf of the applicant. I'd like to begin by thanking members for the opportunity to speak this evening. The presentation and committee report by the officer is comprehensive, and I don't want to repeat the points raised, so I'll try and keep this brief. So, we were initially appointed by the applicant last January to resubmit a previously approved planning application due to their consent expiring. The new proposal was identical to that which had been previously approved back in 2010, and it was subsequently approved by the council this September, but later revoked following the judicial review challenge as described by the officer in their presentation. By speaking today, I just would like to emphasise the patience and resolution of the applicant throughout this process, they've been fully prepared to take the comments from Essex County Council's heritage team into consideration, despite the sort of amendments dramatically amending the scheme, which was originally approved. Throughout the process, and particularly with the revised application, we've worked closely with the council, and significant work has been undertaken to inform the application, including instruction of an independent heritage consultant. We now present the council with a robust proposal which has no impact on the setting of the Grade 2 star listed Stockwell Hall. It complies with the NPPF and is supported by the County Council's heritage team, who raised no objection to the scheme. The only fenestration now proposed on the first floor extension is out of sight to the rear, with the overall height of this element of the dwelling being increased by 70 centimetres. It retains the existing roof pitch and the materials of the dwelling. The intention is to provide additional accommodation in the form of 2 bedrooms and an ensuite to be used for visiting family and supportive care should this be required by the applicant in the future. The proposal would result in no adverse impact on residential amenity, the character and appearance of the existing dwelling, the conservation area, or the setting of the Grade 2 star listed Stockwell Hall. The proposal development is entirely consistent with the National Planning Guidance and the adopted development plan, and therefore there are no planning reasons as why permission should not be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. I have one more name, Ian Little?
That was the first person.
That was Mr. Morris?
Yes.
So we don't have, I had 3 names on the list?
No, we only had 2.
Okay, thank you. Well, with that, I'll reconvene the meeting. Christine, I just want to come to you first and ask if there's anything that's been raised by our residents that you wish to address before I hand over to open it up to our councillors.
No, the report by Thomas was clear. The updates from the agent acting on behalf of the developer were correct. We spent a long time working with the applicant and their architects on coming forward with a scheme that was acceptable. Bear in mind that the original scheme which they put forward, which we actually approved and then was challenged, had already been approved by the council in 2010. So really we've got an improved scheme that, following our advice from the county heritage officers, I think actually now improves the scheme in terms of the impact it has on the listed building. So the work we've done, I think nothing but improves that. Nothing else to add.
Thank you. I'd now like to reconvene the meeting, and as promised, as said, come to Councillor Turner first. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. I think the defendant's solicitor said it all really, but I just want to go back to principles, and this is why I think this report is wrong. It's not about we had an original application that wasn't good enough, so this one's good enough now. It's as Mr. Morris said, that house today wouldn't get built, and therefore if you take it back to that principles, I come from the point where it is what it is, and that is it. And as we've seen, we're starting to encroach beyond the envelope. And I know it's going to be, I think it is subjective. Does it make a difference to the hall next door or not? But my view is it is. A Grade 2 listed building is worth preserving in every respect. And I think as this starts to move and encroach, you can take decision after decision that could gradually erode the beauty of Stockwell Hall. And for anybody that doesn't know it, it's worth a drive by. You won't get too close to it, but it is it's a magnificent hall in a fantastic setting. It's beautifully presented, and no disrespect to the applicant who lives next door. Their property is lovely itself, but I think there's a time when you have to stop. And as I say, coming from the point of view where it is what it is and it should be no more, I don't think officers have got this right, not our officers or county. And I think we lose all this stuff at our peril, because that erosion in itself singularly may not make a hell of a lot of difference. I believe it will start to take away from the elegance and the historic. And that's why I think that we should put a stake in the ground here and say, absolutely not. Again, Chairman, I don't understand where officers come from on these issues. I really don't. I've had this debate with the officers. You know, it seems to be that this is purely subjective. It comes down to opinion. I don't like it, and say we'll change that when we get back into administration. It's coming. And on this one, I think members, I plead with you, don't sell our history this cheaply. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Turner. Does any other councillor wish to speak? I've got Councillor Rimmer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would say that this is, from what I've just heard from the resident and looking at the report and the technical briefing where we were told this has been brought before us because it had gone to judicial review that had overturned this council's decision, and we had to revoke planning permission. I think we've got to be extremely careful when looking at this. And this is something I know the chair herself has taken notice of before with applications where it's gone against our decision and given some weight to that. But I think we have to give some weight to this. It is a heritage site, and there is an argument to say that this cottage in its form should not have been built as it was in the 1970s. But it is here, it exists. Now we have to judge this afresh, but also with knowledge of what had just happened in respect to the judicial review. What I've heard before me, I do identify harm in terms of to the heritage asset. I do think the augmenting of the property, to the extent it is being augmented, will create a lack of will impact on the visual amenity of the heritage asset that we are talking about in terms of Stockwell Hall. And I think we have to weigh that up and give it considerable weight, especially on how long that has been there and how long we want to preserve it for children and grandchildren, generations to come. And I think we've got to think long and hard when we make this decision. And I have made a decision. I think the harm outweighs any benefit, and I would be voting against.
Thank you, Councillor Rimmer. Any other councillor wishing to speak? No. With that, I can appreciate partly what Councillor Turner is saying. I can appreciate what the resident is saying, and that our heritage buildings are really important. Our issue comes about where we don't have that objection from Essex County Council, and I agree we didn't have it before. And the judicial review obviously overturned the planning permission that this committee earlier gave to this proposal, a very similar proposal. However, we need to bear in mind the issues that were raised by that judicial review and the way in which that they have now been addressed. And it is that we need to put weight on, whether or not the issues previously raised have been addressed, and whether or not now the heritage team has any objections to this. And clearly Essex County Council have not raised any issues with this. I do think it's important that we understand though whether the building should or shouldn't have been there previously. That is not something that we're here to determine. We're here to determine whether or not this planning application meets the regulations as set out by the NPPF, while recognising still the importance of that grade 2 listed building, grade 2 star listed building, sorry. And Essex County Council Heritage Team do not raise an objection now that these alterations have been made, and I think we have to put weight on that. So with that, I am going to vote in favour of the recommendation. I'd now ask each councillor if you could unmute yourselves so we can come. I can come to each of you to take the vote.
Sorry, Chair. Can we just ask? Can I just have a quick short adjournment just so I can clarify something?
Yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Sorry, I didn't see that you'd indicated.
Sorry.
Yes. Yes. Okay. Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Guys, I guess we're going to have a short adjournment whilst some legal consideration is taken.
Is it possible, Councillor Brown, whilst this adjournment is happening, that I can ask a question of the officers?
Yes, of course. Yeah. I'm not sure which officers are involved in the legal discussion, but as long as they're not involved in that, then I don't see an issue, Councillor Morris.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I take on board what you're saying about Essex view, but very clearly, Mr. Morris was quoting MPPF and BAS rules. And I wonder whether one of the planning officers would like to comment about those particular points.
First of all, we haven't got a heritage officer in the council, so we actually have. So unlike our relationship with Essex Highways isn't friendly, and sometimes we're at odds. Our relationship with our colleagues at Essex Place Services, in terms of the heritage advice we get from there, is there is a good relationship there, and we work very hard to basically get that response correct with them. So so in terms of that relationship, we work with them. I've just been told by the legal officer I can't answer questions to do with the application, so I give you that bit of information. So that's our issue with Essex County Council. It's not they operate to us on a formal basis and also a helpful basis. On this application, they've worked with us both on both, giving us legal sort of lawful advice on the MPPF and the impacts. And if you look at paragraph 193, that's the relevant paragraph that sets out the weight you give applications for listed buildings when you look at those, and that's on the issue of substantial harm.
Okay, no, I just wondered if you could comment on the 2 points that you made with regards to the MPPF and Baz. Was it BE12 that he mentioned?
Yeah, the points of the National Planning Policy Framework are set out in the report at page 18 to 81.
Yeah,
and the NPP and our policies just relate to development control policy BE12, which we tend to use anyway.
Obviously, his interpretation of both of those is slightly different to the officers.
Sorry, Chair, do you want me to stop the streaming to YouTube for now? Because I've paused the recording. Oh, I can't hear you. Sorry.
Yes, thank you. We just need to wait for our legal team to come back.